So Sajjad, other than being the chief digital officer and the chief marketing officer and all things growth and experience at the Azadea Group, everybody is familiar with the Azadea Groups. How many brands under the group now, Sajjad?
The group have over 40 brands
40.
across
Wow.
fashion, F&B, and lifestyle.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So 40 brands under his kitty, driving growth for all of that. Um, other than doing all the great things that Sajjad is doing at the Azadea Group, he's been our customer in the past. That's by WebEngage customer in the past by being at the extra stores, which has been one of our customer for a very long period of time. There was a lot of interesting things as a customer partner that we've discovered with Sajjad over the last few years, and Sajjad himself carries more than 2 decades of experience. uh, there were a lot of interesting insights on how we think about retention stack and the technology that drives the underlying power that a retention stack needs. Some of those insights we thought would be very useful for the audience here, and that's how we decided to make Sajjad make an appearance here. So please, once again, put your hands together for him. He's been very gracious to be here. Sajjad, please, you've been in the circuit for 2 decades, driving growth at multiple companies. How would you sum up your experiences as?
Sure. Just again, thank you for the invitation. It's great to see everyone here, and we'll hopefully just share some insights. So, I was thinking about the last 5 years, if you like, this morning. I mean, I've been working with Avlesh for over 10 years, and I remember my first marketing automation program was probably in 2003, 2004, back in the UK. So it's an area that has transformed enormously. But then when you just think about, conferences 5 years ago, everyone was talking about big data. Big data was in everyone's, at the front of everyone's lips. Last week, it was data science, data analytics. Today, it's AI. But I think what's really transformed our business over the last 4 or 5 years has been about making first-party data the number one objective within the marketing organization. All of us have challenges over privacy, regulations. Our colleague this morning spoke about living in a cookieless world, iOS tracking, and fundamentally, that should be pushing us all to take more control of our first-party data, because essentially we can own it. It's cost effective, it's efficient, it lets you personalize, and you can drive value from it. And I think what we've tried to do essentially is drive that first party DNA within the culture of the organization, and then consolidate that into CDPs like MoEngage, and then build out the value metrics, whether that be for offline, although I don't really like to talk about customers as being offline, but all of those offline sources and online sources.
Very interesting that you bring that up. And I think, the understanding around data platforms, first party data, they're kind of, very blurry depending on who you ask. Um, for somebody who is starting to set out, the, the consolidation of all of this, Sujat, how should they think? What is first party? How do you, as a marketer, trying to set the tone for this in your org? How do you make a case for this? How do you make a case for centralizing all your data, first party data, getting access to it, to your tech, to your ops teams? How do you go about this?
Sure. Look, I think in our world, it's probably a little bit more difficult because we're a franchise operator. So essentially, we manage brands like Mango, Decathlon, Urban Outfitters, Paul Cafe. And when you're a franchise operator, the data ownership sometimes is related to your franchise agreement. So sometimes you may be a co-owner of the data. Sometimes you just may be have full access to the data. Sometimes you don't have access at all. So I think understanding your rights to the data for us was really important. And then obviously creating that priority within the organization across the different departments. So what we've managed to do by first of all starting off with I think one of the guys this morning mentioned strategy is really important. Of course, if you don't know where you're going to go, you're never going to get there, right? So for us, it was very much about let's understand where all the data points are. What are the big data points? So for us, offline stores was an enormous data point where we worked really, really hard to incentivize and create within the DNA a culture of stores being able to capture customer data, which added value to customers. So whether that's through e-receipts, whether that's through NPS surveys. So all of this data then starts to be funneled back to the CDP. It's integrated with your digital channels, whether that's mobile, web, or app. It's integrated with your traditional CRM tools, whether it's a Zendesk or some sort of customer service platform. And then essentially you've got that single unified profile.
And and it's very counterintuitive, right, for most people to understand how to sort of do this all together. You're talking about stores and actions of a customer within the store, their actions then on your online digital stores. It's sometimes it's very mind-boggling, right, for somebody to sort of put one and one two together. um, and add to that the complexity of all these teams trying to sort of decide between whether should I build this, whether should I buy this. How does one think about having this unified data platform where you have a single source of truth for your customers? Where does one start? How should you go about this?
Yeah, I think it's not easy, right? I think we were very fortunate because our structure enabled all marketing and digital within one team. So we were very much empowered to be able to do that. I think effectively the challenge isn't so much in the systems, it's in the internal capabilities of the client because there's lots of tools, there's lots of platforms out there that can sort of deliver this. But unless you've got the right team that have either done this before or are willing to learn hand in hand with the platform, it becomes very challenging.
Yeah, and because you brought that term on right team. I mean, I cannot insist more on how important that it is. That whole uh, organizational setup is. What's your advice to companies that are starting out on that journey in terms of how to think about whether to build the right team, competence inside, should you insource, outsource? How should one think about setting up this entire ops to have this unified data profile of users, leading all the way to their engagement?
Sure, I think talent's always been one of the biggest challenges in the region, and it's still a challenge. With Saudi opening up, um, when people have good talent, they very quickly move on. Um, so I think when you're going down this approach, there's a lot of value that you can get internally, but there's also a lot of outsourcing that you can do. So I think WebEngage, just as an example, has a lot of partners, and these guys have a lot of experience. In Dubai, we all tend to invest in crypto, invest in real estate, and we have our hobbies. I recently did something similar with one of WebEngage's partners called Sell Through. They've worked, for example, with a company called Nice, and they've managed to drive a significant amount of value very quickly and then train the client. I think the challenge that you have is that the goals are still so futuristic for some people, and to actually make that tangible is quite difficult. So I think when you work with brands, I think some of the guys, I think Ankit's here, right? Is Ankit here? Yeah,
Ankit,
so
you there?
Ankit, yeah. So I think that,
Can you please show yourself to everybody, guys? That's Ankit.
so I think
Yeah.
these guys are an example of where you can clients outsource, for example, some of that scalability, the knowledge of integrating offline data and online data, creating not just journeys for your, let's call them for your omni-channel customers, because ideally what you want to do is send NPSs for your customers in the offline world, but all of that feedback loop should go back to that single unified profile. Ideally, what you want to do is when a customer shops online, you're presenting that data offline into your customer experience flows physically and digitally. And I think sometimes trying to exploit the investment that you made in the tool quickly can be a challenge because you just don't have sufficient resources to go and deliver that scale.
Yeah, and no, and this the customer nice that you mentioned it makes for a very compelling case of them being able to do a lot more, with Ankit and team at Sell Through. Um, I know you had a few things to talk about that case study in particular. Shall we just quickly take a look at
Yeah,
that?
sure. I mean,
Yeah.
we can give you some of the stats, right? So I think the thing that we found most enlightening, if you like, is when you integrate your omni-channel data into a single platform, and you use that platform not just for, let's say, I don't want to call it the basics. You can do the customer acquisition, you can do the pop-ups in terms of acquiring new email addresses. But I think the beauty of using one of these platforms is then you can integrate all of your order messaging. Now, I think there's an example on here on the next slide where actually all of the order updates are sent via WhatsApp.
Can we go to the next slide?
So I think what was really insightful from this is that what the guys had found is that customers were not opening or responding to the email confirmations, and customers were missing the order updates. But if you just flick onto the next slide, but actually what these guys did is they integrated all of the order updates into WhatsApp. So again, I think one of the guys this morning spoke a little bit about how you can actually find the right communication channel for your customers. So therefore, you're actually using the journey builder to send the right types of messages. So I think the next one's like the WhatsApp journey builder, is it? Go one more. So there you go. So actually, instead of sending emails, what they found is that WhatsApp was, I think, the ROAS and the click through it was 7 times more email, 7 times more than email, and 7 times more than SMS. So I think what you can then find is actually make sure customers aren't missing the orders. Customers feel they're being loved in that quiet period between them placing the order and receiving the order. Further examples would be, through this type of engagement, is that if you can get a high penetration of that offline data, you can actually track the influence of your CRM activities on offline sales. So some of the numbers that we see, or some of the numbers that the team see, is that 30% of offline transactions are influenced by CRM activity. So imagine if you can go back to your business and say, actually, 30% of your offline transactions, your physical mortar, are influenced by CRM. You'll get a much bigger resource from those guys in terms of then growing your acquisition in store. Similarly, if you then use this data platform to integrate that unique customer profile, drive that data into Google. Like we said, the guys can integrate these platforms into any third party, drive that customer data into Facebook. Actually, it's very easy for you to complete the research online, or these people saw my digital ads, but then they bought offline. And I think that for me is the real power in any of these platforms. It's how you can take that single profile, measure it not just in terms of the online value, but measure it in terms of the offline value. And I think the nice case study is just a really good example of how you can actually deliver omni-channel benefit, not just focusing on just purely your app and your website, but delivering quantifiable offline value.
Absolutely. Abhishek, can you go back a couple of slides? Yeah, one more. Just stay here for a bit. Yeah, that's fine. So, Sajjad and Ankit, please feel free to take a dig at it if you would like to. Um, these user journeys, right? I mean, of course, we at WebEngage, as the software that provides all these interfaces, we keep saying super easy to build, get it up and running, and it actually is, because that's how we built it. Turns out it's still incredibly hard for somebody to do something as simple as this, right? And there's no rocket science in this. It's actually fairly simple, and getting to this is also not hard, yet it is hard. Why is it so hard, Sajjad?
Why is it so hard?
Yeah.
Why is it so
Why is it
hard?
so hard to get to this?
I think what was interesting, some of the guys were talking this morning, and
Yeah,
they said they've got half a dozen journeys.
yeah,
We have hundreds of journeys running
I'm
through
sure.
these platforms, hundreds, on a daily basis, looking at offline and online. And I think the challenge is actually resource. I think that's because the tool is quite easy. I think vision and resource are the biggest challenges, and maybe vision, experience, and resource are the biggest 3 challenges. Quite often, clients don't understand how far they can take this.
Yeah,
If they do, they've never done it before,
they've not done it before.
and they don't have the resources to implement it.
Yeah. And then would it be wiser in that case, knowing the level of skill and competence within the internal teams and their ability to drive this, outsourcing something like this to a more experienced team would always generate better ROI, right? For you on platforms like WebEngage?
Yeah, I mean, look, we do that in our business today, and like we mentioned, there's partners that you've got like sell through that do that for other clients. I think I see in my own network um, many businesses outsourcing their marketing automation, obviously from a platform perspective, but also from a campaign management perspective, because the speed at which an outsource option can deliver that change
Yep.
is far more significant. Because often, even though the client doesn't have the experience, he may have the vision,
Yep.
but then unlocking that and having a resource that's super trained to better manage the data,
Yep.
manage the tracking, go back and improve and create the A/B journeys,
Yep.
just means that sometimes the execution's quite slow.
I agree. I agree. And it does get overwhelming, when you do this for the first time. Inserting a quick 10-second ad. So Sell-Through is one of the partners of WebEngage, and through them we work with customers like Nice and many more. In case you guys have been using a marketing automation stack, anything like WebEngage or WebEngage, and you feel that you're not able to do enough on the platform, do please find Ankit and team there at Sell-Through and speak to them, or you can just catch one of us. We'll get you to them. It's always worth an experiment to try and get to speed very quickly on platforms like WebEngage, because a lot of it is actually very simple when it's demystified. I think most teams take a few years to get to that learning curve, which is the opportunity cost and the trade-off. So if you want to get there quickly, best to have somebody who's done this in the past and learn from them. And then of course, eventually, of course, you would want to build your own team. Very quickly, Abhishek, can we go to that last slide? I think there was an NPS. I wanted to quickly ask Sajjad the question on this one. Yeah. So on this one, Sajjad. Now, of course, this shows up online. A lot of people from retail background want to unlock this kind of experiences from customers buying at stores or post their purchases. At WebEngage, as I said, right, we keep saying, well, it's simple, easy, you can do it, right? Turns out very hard to do it. Um, how should one build mental models to unlock these kind of experiences? How should they think the big picture? What happens when you do this, and how do you do this?
Yeah, sure. So I think, in the Azadea example, and I believe Nice is the same, is that obviously all of that data not only flows back into WebEngage, which is
The
fine, but
offline transaction data.
the offline transaction data. So
Yeah.
essentially, this is a great way of capturing, first of all, offline data. So
and
that's the
and just to
first
simplify
piece.
this for everybody, once the offline data flows into WebEngage, triggering triggering these journeys to trigger or seek these NPS responses from customers, irrespective of whether the transaction was done online or offline, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah,
Customers get.
yeah. If we want to start the big night, so imagine just a customer walks into a store or they're online, they've completed a transaction. Customers then asked, "How was your journey?" And you'll see the happy faces, etc.
Yeah.
So all of that sort of experience can be served by a WebEngage. Customer says, "I had a great experience" or "I had a bad experience." The online version could be an email or it could be a pop-up after the checkout. All of that information then flows into your unified profile. You now know this customer bought in this store, you know what he bought, just as you do online. So now you've really got a single unified view of that customer. You're then able to tell actually his last online purchase was last month, his last offline purchase was last week. Did he use his mobile? Did he use his desktop? Or did he use the physical channel? Obviously, that data then is shared through dashboards, through to the commercial team. If the customer's had a bad experience on a certain product, if the customer's had a bad experience with a last mile courier, but you can use this single unified profile with the dashboards to basically give all of your different teams the access to that last mile feedback, the in-store feedback, the product feedback, and of course, build the right marketing journeys to then personalize ongoing messages to the customer. So it may be that the first time a customer visits a store, you've captured that data. You can then start a number of communications to that customer about actually the new stock has arrived in store next week. actually come and do the showroom. Actually, we've now opened up a new store that's within your local geography. So you're now able to do omni-channel customer messaging rather than only talking to your app customers or your web customers.
Absolutely. And the channels, including email, WhatsApp, text messages, whatever works for your business, they can all be unlocked for users, whether they are offline, in your retail stores, or they're online. Right. So you can immediately unlock your reach outs to pretty much all your retail customers.
Yeah, I
Right.
would just say not only unlock, but I think we've got data that we've proven that 30% of offline transactions are influenced by CRM communications.
That's a
So
very interesting insight.
30% of offline transactions in our stores have engaged with the CRM communication. And of course, the data that sits within the CDP can be shared with Google and Facebook, so you can retarget those customers. And through the platform, we can also prove and have proven that for every dollar that we spend, we see $3 of transactions offline. So like, you can really take this to give you the full marketing metrics and measurement that you need for your offline business as well as your online business.
Absolutely. No, if I had my way, I would continue and ask you a whole bunch of other questions. Very interesting topic for me personally. I feel very excited when I come across practitioners who really understand what this is all about. But anyway, I will have to close this. We can take a quick question or two if anybody in the audience. Sajjad and the team at Sell Through, they're going to be around, for you guys to catch up separately. But any questions? Yes, hey, Mohammed.
So my question is around the attribution of the contribution of CRM campaigns to the what's happening in the offline part of the business. And you mentioned it should be around 30 to 40%.
Yeah, it's obviously, we look at different attribution windows for different channels. I think the statistic that I gave you of 30% of offline sales influenced by CRM is within a 14-day window.
Okay, and my main question here is that
Because that's an offline metric, so we give it a bit more time.
yes, you said influence, and it's not directly attributed. So, as a business, do you when you assess your CRM business, you look at direct contribution or influence? Because most of the companies are like, they say, okay, I want the actual cash flow coming from these campaigns and not the engagement.
Can I take a dig at
Yeah,
that?
yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So, Mohammed, we definitely need to make you a WebEngage customer because you were the only one on that panel who was not. Um, the the way that attribution works in the CRM space generally, it's sort of look back. So, what tools like WebEngage would do is for every campaign that you create, it asks you how do you want to measure conversion, which typically is a transaction always. Now, the way a tool like WebEngage attributes is it records conversions, which is an independent exercise. So all conversions happening, whether in your store, whether it's happening online on your app, it's all getting recorded. Now, the the attribution is actually a backfill. So what it tries to do is which are the campaigns who wants to get an attribution for this conversion. Now, if only one campaign gets that attribution, if at all, and this is all driven by the logic. Now, the one campaign that gets it is the most sort of engaged with campaign. So if somebody has opened your email, clicked on it, and converted within that 14-day time window, that campaign on which the user performed the open and the click gets the attribution. This is as direct as it gets. However, there will be indirect attributions too. So, for example, in the offline world, when when Sajjad says CRM influenced or CRM led, you also want to attribute IBOTs because that's how the user behaves, right? If you have an offer that was sent on WhatsApp and on email, and the offer is new products in in the catalog, why don't you come check them out? The the WhatsApp message being seen by the user is an activity that is recorded by the CRM. The guy buying in the store is also an activity recorded by the CRM. These are two asynchronous activities recorded by the CRM. The attribution is a backfill based on the logic. So if the guy has bought in the store and the WhatsApp message was seen in that time window, that WhatsApp message gets the attribution. Whether that directly led to the purchase, anybody's guess. Nobody knows. But in the CRM world, you can at least very well confidently say that this transaction was influenced by the WhatsApp message I sent. And if you were sort of adding more coupon codes, etc., in that WhatsApp message, which were redeemed, then you definitely know that's the case. However, the influence of this message on the conversion still stays the way it does. So yes, it's a, there's, like all things CRM, there will be gray, but this is how you sort of kind of go backwards and do this look back around the conversion logic. Sorry, long answer to a short question.
I'll just say the other comment is that when you've got that data, it helps you so much when you're talking to store managers, when you're talking to retail people, because they'll say, oh, my staff don't have the time to enter the email address in the point of sale. Customers don't want to fill out the NPS feedback. When you start to tell them that all of this digital communication is driving value to your store, the whole conversation changes, right? So I think that's actually an enormous benefit, but then you need to share that with the operations teams and the retail teams.
Thank you.
Hello, gents. Thank you so much for the great session. So I have an interesting question for Mohammed Sajjad. So Azadea has multiple brands from multiple sectors. Have you tried looking at the correlation in behavior across brands and across sectors? So as an example, I mean, you could just find out that certain people that get coffee are also interested in certain fashion. I think this is brilliant if you could do that. Again, I don't know if you're allowed to do that with certain brands, and I don't know if you've done that. That's my question.
Yeah, again, I think it's really challenging because the franchise rights are so different for every brand. So there are certain brands where we don't actually own the data. We'll work really hard to capture that data in store through e-receipts or e-tickets. But then all the marketing of that data is done from Spain or done from Italy by the group. So there's some brands that we don't even have access to the data for. There are other brands that we do where we're far more involved. But again, one of the principles of being a franchise operator is actually having certain silos where we don't share information between the different brands because that would be a breach of confidentiality. So it's quite a challenging area when it comes to data sharing across brands, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it would be really interesting and exciting to see what.
No, I fully understand. Actually, I want to mention like a quick example. I used to work for a conglomerate that had multiple businesses, and we saw a correlation between people that bought couches and people that bought coffee machines. And people that bought couches were very interested in buying coffee machines for some reason. And when we've done a campaign targeting people that bought couches with, let's say, a coupon to buy a coffee machine from another brand that company owned, actually gave us amazing results. But again, they were both owned by the same company in terms of brands. They were not franchises.
I remember when we were at Extra and we implemented WebEngage, 7 or 8 years ago. We did a very similar exercise, but what we found is that customers would only come into one category. So Extra was an electronics retailer, selling mobile phones, laptops, washing machines, TVs. But they would always come in on mobile. So customer acquisition was very category-led. So therefore, the data and all of the in-app notifications and all the web pushes were all about breadth of purchase. But then so we drove basically marketing objectives around breadth of purchase, which essentially how do we get them to buy other categories from some of the insights that we'd already seen where there was more, where there was already a data trend that suggested the mobile customer was happier to buy laptops than happy to buy TVs. So therefore, we sort of use that analysis to push that breadth of purchase.
Okay, thanks a lot.
No, and it happens, right? That this is a way, your question is very sort of appropriate in this whole multi-brand, multi-product setups. We work with Modern Electronics, for example, in Saudi, which is the sole distributor for Sony and many other brands. Now, each of these brands, they have their own complexity, and the right to data for Modern on each of these brands is very different. across our brands. So the kind of things that you can unlock is also very different. And what Sajjad started the conversation with is how it starts. Knowing what those rights are in your marketing ops makes things just super simple downstream. You can, within the constraints of what you have, you can still do a lot of things. Not knowing is how it starts, and then tools like WebEngage, they sort of get you on that path. But anyway, thank you so much. We are out of time, so I'll have to close this. Thank you everybody for being a great audience, and thank you Sajjad for doing this.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
WebEngage. Retention simplified.